Good morning and welcome to the first ever weekly Capital Update Show. We are so thrilled to bring you this live weekly show about what's happening in government and how it impacts Arizona's LGBTQ plus community. I'm Angela Hughey. I want to share with you a little bit about One Community and our history advocating for our LGBTQ plus community and inclusion in the great state of Arizona. For One Community, it all starts with the Unity Pledge, this little pledge that we launched in February of 2013. The pledge is coming up on 11 years. In the time that we've had the pledge, we've been able to get 10 municipal ordinances and we've added protections to 3.2 million Arizona residents, it's amazing the power of the pledge, right, Michael?
It's absolutely incredible, Ange. I'm Michael Soto, and Angela, I'm so thrilled to be here with you and so excited to be doing these updates together. This is just like, I feel like the fruition of a lot of dreaming.
We are audacious. We love to dream together, and this absolutely is a dream come true.
It
So
really
so
is.
happy to be spending this time with you,
Oh my
and
gosh,
then
I can't wait.
to be educating Arizonans across the state about why it's so important that we're LGBTQ inclusive,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
I think really the policy that impacts our LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, I've worked in this field for about 25 years. I've worked in red states in Arizona primarily and federally. And the one thing that I think I've seen across the board is that we as a movement, right, have not done the best job of teaching people, of sharing information
Yeah.
in real time and in teaching people about what it actually means to work with government to protect LGBTQ Arizonans and Americans.
Yeah.
And so I think this show is such a great opportunity for us to do that.
Yeah, and I tell you this all the time, but I learn pretty much every day I'm having a conversation with you. So I'm certainly excited to learn more. I'm excited to help educate everyone in this great state of Arizona and our LGBTQ plus community about how policy impacts our lives,
Yes.
and then how we work together and build coalitions so that we can get good, solid protections and make sure that everyone in this great state has the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I learn every day too, right? And like a lot of that is not just the nuts and bolts of what it means to make policy, but what it means to form those effective coalitions,
Yeah.
right? What it means to build grassroots support for policy. Those are all critical parts of this work, and we get to explore all that together on the
I'm
show.
so excited.
I can't wait. Oh,
So,
wonderful.
Michael, we're tracking how many bills now?
We're tracking over a dozen bills in the Arizona legislature right now, and that sounds like a lot, and it's not a small number, right? But we know over the last 3 years that that number has risen in every state, right? Of bills that both for LGBTQ equality or that would further protections, and bills that would roll back protections, right? And so we're living in a time of sort of renewed culture wars, so it's
Yeah.
something to always be aware of. But what I love about our approach is that we are so aware of that we try to not fuel those culture wars.
Right.
And so we want to give you good information about these bills, but we don't want you to be afraid of them, right? We don't want any Arizonan, any American really to be terrified or to feel alone in this process. And so, we're here for you, and that we're keeping an eye on these bills,
Absolutely.
and we're going to let you know what's happening so that you can be educated and activated appropriately. Right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we always wanted to start the show. And, part of our commitment to educating all Arizonans, and in particular our LGBTQ plus community, is we have this dynamic bill tracker on the One Community site now. So
Yes.
anybody can go to the One Community site and you can actively see the bills that we are tracking. And if you press any link on any hyperlink on a bill that we're watching, you can actually log in and you can get your own password, right?
Yep.
So that you can have legislative updates that come to your email. We want to make sure folks are absolutely educated about what's in the contents of these bills,
Yes.
and then also educated on how to activate if we need to. But
If
to
we
your
need to,
point,
yeah.
we don't want to fuel the fire this year.
Exactly. And I mean, knowledge is power, right?
Yep.
So we want you to see the bills. We want you to know everything about them, what their proposed impact is. But we also want you to realize that it's real hard for a bill to become a law in Arizona. And that's by
Super hard.
design, right?
Yep.
And that's a good thing. That's how the legislative process works throughout our country. And so that means that the vast majority of these these bills are never going to impact anyone's life, right?
Right.
And they're not going to become law. But we still want people to know if there is that opportunity or chance to get activated, to speak in favor of bills, or speak out against the impact that a bill could have. And
Yep.
so both of those things are really important when it comes to advocacy.
Absolutely. But there is a bill that we are particularly excited
Yes.
about. And so we are
Yes.
so excited this morning to share that HB 2736, the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans Act, is here. We are so excited. This is the third year that Representative Amish Shah dropped the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans Act. And what we want to do here is fully protect LGBTQ plus Arizonans in employment, in housing, and public accommodations by adding sexual orientation and gender identity to our state's protected classes. The other thing we want to do is we really want to codify Governor Hobbs' ban on conversion therapy.
Yes.
Can you talk about why it's so important that we codify the conversion therapy ban?
Oh, absolutely. So, Governor Hobbs is an incredible leader, and did a wonderful thing last year by signing this executive order, which we fully support. But codification, which basically just means taking something like an executive order or a Supreme Court decision, and turning it into written law, right? Making it a part of the Arizona state statute, that gives it sort of an enduring quality, right?
Right.
Because something like an executive order, especially, that is during her administration, which right now we're starting the
Year 3?
year 3, so it's exciting. But she's up for reelection, right, in year 4, and so that executive order, at the end of her administration with a new governor could overturn it, right?
Right.
Or could write a new executive order, could any sort of thing like that. It's just a little more vulnerable in terms of law.
Well, I would hope that all Americans learn that if you don't codify a law, it's really dangerous because
Exactly.
of the Supreme Court overturning the Roe v. Wade
Yes.
decision, right?
That's such a perfect
50
example.
years that law
Yes.
was on the books
Yes.
through a Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
And now, people are fighting, to make sure that they have autonomy over
Yeah.
making their own healthcare decisions.
Well, and that's exactly why we engage so much on the Respect for Marriage Act,
Right.
right? Because after the Dobbs decision, which that should have been codified into
Well, we
law.
pivoted, right?
We did, yeah. We were working on non-discrimination
Yep.
federally, actually, and statewide. But we pivoted to the Respect for Marriage Act because of that importance of codifying.
Yeah.
We can't just rely on one form, right, of law, like a Supreme Court decision
Absolutely.
or executive order. Let's get it written into statute.
Well, and so since you've moved us to the Respect for Marriage Act, I want to dig in for just a moment because so that bipartisan piece of legislation, first time a bill that codified protections for LGBTQ Americans or added protections for LGBTQ Americans ever made it to a president's desk.
It is amazing. I mean, we were there when it was signed, which was incredible.
Yeah.
We were with our friends from North Carolina and from West Virginia and from Georgia, and Wyoming. It was just such a beautiful thing to be there as that bill was signed. And I mean, I was moved to tears multiple times. But we know all the hard work that went into that and the diversity of voices from across this country that senators, in particular, U.S. senators, needed to hear from. People in Idaho, right? People in North Dakota, people from Alabama, right? People from Tennessee saying, people from Arizona. We brought a lot of folks from Arizona saying, I believe that we can protect the civil rights and the civil marriage of all people, especially LGBT people in interracial marriage, and that's not a conflict with religion or faith or anything.
Right. Because marriage is a civil right.
Exactly. It's a civil right. It's a civil process. And that was so important for those senators to hear and really what paved the way for making that vote possible, right?
1,138 rights and protections that can never, ever be taken away from any married couple like Sherry and I.
Exactly.
And that's like super important.
It's so important, right? Because that bill made sure that as long as there's one state in the union that's marrying interracial couples and LGBT people, every state has to recognize it. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's federal recognitions. And it's so important, it's pretty public knowledge that I was on a health journey last year, and certainly didn't see that coming. But to know that my wife was in a position to always be with me when we were making really important decisions about my healthcare journey,
Yeah.
that was so important. And I was in a meeting the other day, and I was telling the person I was meeting with that, prior to marriage equality coming to protect LGBTQ couples for years, for the first half of our relationship together, we used to drive around with like all these documents in the glove box, right? In case one of us was not in a position to make healthcare decisions for ourselves. And you always hope that you had enough, all the right documents, and it was enough, and that you wouldn't be challenged. But to have that always sitting on your shoulder, I remember, Sherry and I were married in 2008 in California, and then marriage was rolled back.
Wow.
And because we were Arizona residents, we didn't. The marriage certificate didn't have any legal protections, and then marriage equality came to the great state of Arizona, and just that deep exhale that I felt, right?
Yeah.
And then marriage equality came to the United States, and just the safety that we felt, the joy and celebration that we felt, that our marriage and our family was legally recognized, of course, but just knowing that we never again had to worry about being in a position to know that we were there to provide for one another.
Yes. Yeah.
So important.
It's such a fundamental right,
Yeah.
and so important to everyone in this country. These are just things that are often taken for granted, just like the right to be able to go to work, right? And to be who you are, and to not face discrimination because of that, or to rent or own a home and be who you are in
Right.
that home, or to go to an emergency room, right? And
Right.
be able to receive care for a car accident, or for some other, for an illness, without being discriminated against because of who you are, who you
So important,
so
right?
important.
And so for folks that may not know, there's 11 municipal ordinances that are LGBTQ inclusive in the
Yes.
state of Arizona now,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that covers 52% of our population, because these ordinances are largely in Maricopa County, right? And then also in Tucson, Sedona, Flagstaff, and the town of Winslow.
Winslow.
Come
Put
on,
in.
Winslow. I'll never forget Sophie and I driving up to Winslow and driving home at like 2:00 in the morning. We were tired,
I
but it was
bet.
so worth it, because everyone is welcome in the town of Winslow, which is so important. But when you look at a map of the state of Arizona, right, at 52%, it seems like, wait, we've really come a long way, and we have.
Yeah.
Without a doubt,
Yeah.
this is incremental change. It's important. But if you're an LGBTQ Arizonan, or if you're here visiting for the big game, or the Waste Management Open, or just coming to this great state because it's so gorgeous and amazing, right? Your rights literally change based on the zip code that you're in, right? Cher
Yeah.
and I love to do day trips and little staycations around the state, and it's wild to know that, like, wherever we're driving,
Yeah.
we lose the same protections as our heterosexual counterparts, because we don't have statewide protections. That's
Yeah.
why we're so supportive, obviously, of equality and fairness for all Arizonans.
Yes.
And when we look at the 11 municipal ordinances, they all have an exemption for religious-based organizations.
They do.
So we think that stays in line when you're talking about a statewide
Well,
policy as
of
well.
course, because that's how these bills are done,
Yeah.
right? And so all of the statewide bills, right? This is just the model that we have been able to use to create this policy that ensures equal protection in the workplace,
Right.
in our homes, and in public accommodations for LGBTQ people, in part because we have freedom of religion in this country, right? Guaranteed
Right.
by the First
And the
Amendment.
First Amendment.
Exactly.
And that these two things don't have to be in conflict.
Because they're not,
Right.
like they're, I think that's a big part of myth busting here, is that we live in a really polarized time, right? We live in a time where there are a lot of voices telling us you have to choose one way of being.
Well, there's this belief that you're taking something from
Right.
one community in order to gain rights.
Right.
And our point is always, this is equal protection under the law, not special protection.
Exactly.
We're not looking for special rights.
We're not.
We're not looking for special protections.
Right.
We're looking to ensure that LGBTQ plus Arizonans have the same rights and protections as their non-LGBTQ plus counterparts.
Right. Well, and rights, human rights, civil rights, these are not a finite resource.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't mean that for me to have equal rights, I have to take those from someone else.
Yep.
Rights actually work the opposite way. When we work for the dignity, respect, and rights of any group of people, we have a greater chance of elevating everybody's
Right.
rights. And so it's not a zero-sum game. It's actually, something where all high tide lift all
Yep,
boats,
we
right?
talk about that all the time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And for us, this is about creating an Arizona where every Arizonan has the opportunity to thrive,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. Um,
Want to talk about some of our other local LGBTQ plus organizations that support our approach with equality and
yes.
fairness for all Arizonans?
Would love to. So we are so lucky to do this work in that coalition building, in that big tent way, that we know is the way that you get policy work done,
Right.
right? And so we have, I think, largely due to your expertise in this coalition building area, have built some amazing support for our bill, for the
Yeah.
Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans bill. Do you want to share who those folks are?
Sure. So, local LGBTQ based organizations that are absolutely in support and endorsing equality and fairness for all Arizonans, the 2024 version, our good friends at 1 in 10,
Yes,
Southwest Center, the
amazing.
Greater Phoenix Equality Chamber. And here's what's so important, this bill just dropped this
Yeah.
week. So, when we initially dropped equality and fairness for all Arizonans in 2022,
Yes.
in a 72-hour period, we were able to get 591 businesses and organizations across the great state of Arizona and faith-based organizations across the great state of Arizona to support equality and fairness for all Arizonans in this
Amazing.
truly bipartisan framework, right? And so we just dropped the bill.
Mhm.
We're going to be having cups of coffee and non-caffeinated beverages for the rest of the year, talking about the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans Act. We're happy to walk anyone that wants to go through it literally line by line through the bill.
Yes.
We'll be holding stakeholder meetings with our LGBTQ plus community and the business community and faith communities and everyday Arizonans. We want to make sure that folks are really, really educated on what's in the bill and why we think this is the policy that can actually make it over the line
Yeah.
to Governor Hobbs' desk.
Absolutely, because education is so
Yep.
important, right? And so our bill number this year is HB 2736. And we're so excited for this bill. And before we talk about anything else, I just want to make sure we give Dr. Mishaw the recognition and props that he
So grateful
deserves.
for Dr. Shaw. He's been
Yes.
such an active ally and a courageous active ally to the LGBTQ plus community, and he's championed this bill 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And we're so grateful for his courage and his strength. And there was an article because Dr. Shaw stepped down because he's running for Congress.
Exactly.
And in the article in the Republic, it talked about how he was one of just a few Democrats that have been able to pass bills that have made it to Governor Hobbs' desk.
Yeah.
And it's been his pragmatic approach,
Yes.
his ability to work across the aisle and
Yeah.
find common sense solutions
Yeah.
on the policies that really impact Arizonans,
Yeah,
right?
I think, Dr. Shaw is he's very politically attuned in that he understands that the Arizona electorate is split into three categories,
Yep.
right, by our voter registration, Republicans, independents, and then Democrats. And he knows that the best policy, like civil rights policy from the
Absolutely.
1960s, is created by working with people across ideological backgrounds and
Yep.
difference. And so he's just been a wonderful and such an active ally to the LGBTQ community, not only partnering with us, but partnering with many different organizations and groups
Absolutely.
and running all sorts of bills that would benefit LGBTQ people and all Arizonans. And so just a huge shout out and a thanks
Yes.
from us
Thank
to
you, Dr. Shaw. We're so grateful for your courage and
Yes.
commitment to a state that celebrates, respects, and protects all of us equally.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So I want to pivot.
Okay.
I want
let's
to
do it.
pivot because there's not one right way to get there, right?
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
think it's important that folks know that there's another bill that's been introduced,
Yeah.
HB 2625, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
And that was dropped a couple weeks ago.
It was. It
Yeah.
was, I think, on January 18th,
Okay,
is when
so
it was dropped.
okay.
So, and this bill is supported by some national affiliate organizations here in Arizona. It was written by the ACLU of Arizona, which is the national affiliate for the ACLU, right? The American
Absolutely.
Civil
Yeah.
Liberties Union. Great organization, right? Doing lots of work and with a long history, right?
Sure.
And then supported by the Human Rights Campaign and GLSEN, their affiliates here in Arizona, as well as the Southern Arizona Gender Alliance.
Okay.
And so, as Angela said, there's not one way to do this,
No.
right? There is not one strategy that gets you, to the governor's desks and makes it law. The way that public policy is done, I think we've learned this a lot over the
Yeah.
last couple of years, is that it takes a whole bunch of different strategies, right? It takes a lot of people working from their experience, right, and their knowledge base, proposing ideas, working with different legislators, putting those ideas on the table, and
Yes.
then coming up with the magic recipe there from, all of those different ideas, all of those different bill propositions, and then finding the way to actually get to a law.
Right. And,
Yeah,
and this takes time,
it
right?
does.
So one community supported the first bipartisan bill that was introduced in 2018,
Yes,
right?
I remember that.
Yeah, that was such a big deal. Shout out
Huge.
to former Representative Daniel Hernandez and
Yes.
Senator Kate Brophy McGee, the powerhouse dynamic duo, and their bipartisanship, and they're just remarkable human beings.
Yes.
So this is a long road ahead, and we are introducing in 2024, but have been very open about the fact that we think that the opportunity to get equality and fairness for all Arizonans over the line is in 2025.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. And in part because it's an election year,
Yeah.
right? And we also again are living in really polarized times, right? And
Right.
that's reflected in not just the Arizona state government, our legislature, but in many state legislatures and assemblies throughout the country, in Congress, right? And we know that an election year is not the time when that comes down, when the temperature
No,
comes
it
down on
kind of goes
polarization.
up a little bit.
It does, and I think we're seeing that already, right? For so many reasons. I think, from the indictments around former President Trump to the all of that sort of stuff, right? There's just a lot of reasons why the
Issues on the
temperature,
border.
yeah, all inflation, right?
Yeah.
War. We have actual, like, very tangible hot wars happening all over the world right now that the U.S. is engaged in different ways, through support, or that our allies are, that our opposition. I mean,
We lost 3 service members
we did. Yeah,
last week, and then the majority of the folks that were hurt were Arizona National Guards
exactly.
men. So we hope everyone is
Yeah.
on the mend.
We do, but we know that this is not a time when that political temperature is going to come down, and so this year is a time for educating, for
Yes,
discussion, for, like we said, putting all the strategies on the table, and then finding whatever the magic mix is to actually get to a bill that becomes a law
yeah.
next year, right? And so we love that part of this. I think we both get real excited about that part of throwing
We're
all the
kind of
ideas against the
geeky.
wall. We're super geeky. We love to look at the big picture. We love to have those discussions with everybody,
Yeah,
right? We're like, come to the table. Let's have that big group discussion so that we can actually get to a bill, that actually becomes law in 2025. And so that's our goal. And we're just excited to be in the mix and a part of that conversation.
yeah.
And like always, we invite everybody to the table
Yeah,
to
well,
have that conversation
and
with us.
again, we'll be holding LGBTQ plus
We will be.
stakeholder meetings with the business community, with faith groups. Our goal is to educate and hear what folks have to say this year,
Yeah.
and to really take that all in, so that we really have set ourselves up
Yes.
to get equality and fairness for all Arizonans over the line in 2025.
Exactly, because what a difference that would make,
Yeah,
right? Arizona, I mean, this is a state that a lot of people think that non-discrimination protections that are inclusive of LGBTQ people will never happen, and I think we can prove them wrong.
I don't know. Look at Mesa.
I know. Mesa, I mean,
Shout out to Mayor Giles.
yeah, our favorite. He's the best. Love Mayor Giles. Um, but I mean that, like, in and of itself, like,
Mesa, Scottsdale, Glendale,
yeah,
Tolleson, Chandler, all since
all in the
2021.
yeah,
All since 2021.
which is just
Yeah,
amazing, right? And it just shows that we can do anything that we set our minds to.
absolutely.
There's no reason to count Arizona out in terms of doing this kind of amazing work and protecting all Arizonans in employment, housing, and public accommodations. And
And hey,
it
while we're at it, let's codify that conversion therapy ban.
absolutely, because we believe in protecting LGBTQ people,
Absolutely.
right? Especially LGBTQ youth, right? And that's, the conversion therapy ban is really about ensuring that youth are not subjected to this form of
Abuse.
abuse, really, yeah. Um, by licensed professionals, right?
Right.
And that's not supported by the state of Arizona, and saying that loudly and clearly. And that seems like a pretty good thing, a pretty good win for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is our first update.
I know, I
We've
love
been
it.
talking about this for so how's
Yeah,
it feel?
it feels great.
Awesome.
I hope our audience is enjoying it and
Absolutely.
learning a lot, and getting excited about the legislative process and how we can use that to further everyone's rights in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
That's all I got today.
We're signing off. Have
We
a
are.
great weekend, everyone.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us for Better Together weekly capital updates.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Well done.
Well done.